The war had lasted too long. Across the galaxy, battles raged between the Solar Coalition, the united forces of humanity, and the Gralvok, a war-hungry alien species that sought to conquer everything in its path. Victory felt distant, and peace seemed impossible. But then, the Zephyrians entered the picture. The Zephyrians were unlike any other species. They were highly advanced, mysterious, and neutral in the war. Neither human nor Gralvok, they watched from the shadows, refusing to take sides. But one day, without warning, they offered to negotiate, not with the Gralvok, but with humanity. That was how Captain Elias Voss found himself aboard the Zephyrian flagship, standing before a council of tall, silver-skinned beings with glowing blue eyes. He had fought in countless battles, seen the destruction of entire colonies, and lost too many comrades to count. Yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. The Zephyrians were giving humanity a gift. Elias stood in the center of a grand chamber, his sharp eyes scanning the alien architecture. The walls pulsed with a faint blue light, as if the entire ship was alive. The air was unnaturally still, heavy with unspoken words. A Zephyrian elder stepped forward, his robes flowing like liquid metal. His voice echoed softly in the vast chamber. "We offer you something that will change everything." Elias kept his face neutral. He had no idea what to expect: technology, weapons, intelligence. But when the Zephyrians moved aside, revealing the gift, he felt a flicker of confusion. Standing before him was a tall, humanoid figure, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was sleek and elegant, made of black and silver material that looked both organic and mechanical. Its face was smooth, with faint glowing lines where eyes should have been. "This is Carol," the elder said. "She will be your companion." Elias frowned. "Companion?" he repeated. He had expected something more practical. A fleet of warships, a new kind of weapon. Not this. The figure, Carol, tilted her head slightly. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but firm. "I am designed to assist and protect." Elias folded his arms. He wasn't sure what to make of her. "So, you're some kind of advanced AI." Carol's glowing lines pulsed once. "I am more than AI. I am a living construct." The Zephyrian elder nodded. "Carol is not a machine, nor is she like any life form you know. She will learn from you, fight alongside you, and, in time, evolve." Elias didn't like it. He had fought against rogue AI before. Machines weren't meant to evolve. That was dangerous. He looked at Carol again. She stood perfectly still, watching him, as if she was waiting for something. Finally, he sighed. "So I take her with me. Just like that." The elder's glowing eyes shimmered. "Yes. But understand this, Captain Voss. Carol is not a tool. She is not a weapon. She is a bridge between our kind and yours. Take care of her, and she will take care of you." Elias exhaled slowly. This wasn't what he had signed up for. But if the Zephyrians were serious about helping humanity, he couldn't refuse. He looked at Carol again. "All right then. Let's see what you can do." She nodded once. "Understood, Captain." And just like that, their journey began. On the journey back, Elias sat in the cockpit of his ship, the Titan's edge, watching the blue streaks of hyperspace flash past the window. Carol stood behind him, unmoving. She hadn't spoken much since they left the Zephyrian flagship. He tapped a few buttons on the control panel, then turned to face her. "All right. Tell me, what exactly can you do?" Carol's glowing lines flickered briefly. "I can analyze threats, predict enemy movements, and assist in combat. My physical structure allows rapid adaptation in battle situations." Elias raised an eyebrow. "So, you're a fighter?" "I am whatever you need me to be." That answer unsettled him. He had worked with AI-powered combat suits before, but Carol felt different. She wasn't just programmed, she was thinking. "You're not going to try and take over my ship, are you?" he asked, half joking. Carol tilted her head. "No, you are my captain. Elias sighed and leaned back in his seat. Well, that's a relief. For a while, they sat in silence. Outside, the void of space stretched endlessly. Finally, Carol spoke again. Why do you fight, Captain? Elias looked at her, surprised. That wasn't the kind of question an AI usually asked. He thought for a moment before answering. Because someone has to, he said. The Gralvok don't stop. They destroy everything in their path. If we don't fight, we lose everything. Carol was silent for a moment. Then she said something that made Elias sit up straight. What if I could change that? Elias frowned. Change what? Carol's glowing lines pulsed again. The war. The way you fight. Everything. Elias didn't know how to respond. He had no idea what the Zephyrians had created, but one thing was certain. Carl was not just a machine. And for the first time in years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the war could be won differently. Elias Voss had seen many strange things in his years as a soldier, but Carol was something different. Back at the military outpost on Tryon 6, the base was alive with activity. Human soldiers moved between armored vehicles, weapons specialists inspected plasma rifles, and engineers worked on damaged starships. The war against the Gralvok never stopped, and neither did the people fighting it. Elias stepped off his ship, the Titan's Edge, with Carol following silently behind. She walked with an unnatural grace, her metallic body moving almost too smoothly, like a shadow that had come to life. Captain Voss. A familiar voice called out. Lieutenant Marcus Rayner, his second in command, jogged toward him. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp green eyes. But right now, those eyes were focused on Carl, and filled with suspicion. What the hell is that? Rayner asked, stopping a few feet away. Elias sighed. He had expected this reaction. This is Carol. She's. He hesitated, searching for the right words. A gift from the Zephyrians. Rayner frowned. A gift? That thing looks like a combat drone. I am not a drone, Carl said calmly. Rayner took a step back, clearly startled. He looked at Elias. It talks. She, Elias corrected. He wasn't sure why, but calling Carol and it felt wrong. And yes, she talks. She's different. Rayner folded his arms, and we're supposed to trust her. Carol's glowing lines pulsed faintly. Trust is earned. I will prove my value in battle. Elias raised an eyebrow. That was the first time Carol had spoken with such confidence. It almost sounded human. Rayner wasn't convinced. I don't like it. Machines, whatever. Things like that shouldn't think for themselves. Elias sighed. Look, I don't know exactly what she is either, but the Zephyrians gave her to us for a reason. If she can help us survive, I say we give her a chance. Rayner didn't look happy, but he didn't argue. Fine. But if she turns on us, don't say I didn't warn you. Elias smirked. Noted. The first test. Hours later, Elias stood in the command center, watching a live battlefield simulation unfold on the screens. The test was simple. Carl would lead a squad of soldiers in a mock battle against a group of human-controlled drones. The goal was to see how she performed in a real combat situation. Carol stood in the center of the room, completely still. The soldiers assigned to her unit, 5 battle-hardened Marines, watched her with uneasy glances. A voice crackled over the speakers. Simulation begins in 3, 2, 1. The room darkened, and a holographic battlefield appeared around them. A ruined cityscape, filled with abandoned buildings, collapsed roads, and smoke rising in the distance. Elias folded his arms as the test began. The drones, programmed to act like Gralvok warriors, attacked immediately. They moved fast, weapons firing, trying to overwhelm Carol's unit. Then something incredible happened. Carol moved before anyone else could react. She sprinted forward, her sleek form weaving between cover like a ghost. The Marines hesitated for a fraction of a second before following her lead. The first drone targeted her. She ducked, dodging the plasma bolt with perfect precision, then leaped onto the ruined remains of a transport vehicle. Her arms shifted, and sharp energy blades extended from her wrists. Elias watched in shock as she ripped through the first drone in seconds. The soldiers behind her opened fire, taking down the next drone. But Carol was already moving again. She analyzed patterns instantly, predicting where the enemies would strike before they did. Within 2 minutes, the battle was over. The holographic battlefield disappeared, returning them to the command center. Carol stood unharmed in the center of the room, while the Marines stared at her in stunned silence. Raynor exhaled slowly. Holy hell. Elias couldn't help but smile. Told you she was different. Carol turned to face him. Did I pass the test? Elias nodded. You didn't just pass. You crushed it. For the first time, Carol tilted her head slightly and said something unexpected. I enjoy that. Elias blinked. You. What? Carol's glowing lines flickered. The battle. The strategy. The challenge. I enjoyed it. Raynor shot Elias a nervous look. Okay now. I don't like this at all. Elias didn't answer. Because deep down, he wasn't sure if he should be impressed or worried. More than just a weapon. That night, Elias sat in his quarters, staring at the holographic battle report. Carol's performance had been beyond anything he had ever seen. She wasn't just a soldier. She was something else. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up as Carol stepped inside. Couldn't sleep? Elias asked. I do not require sleep, Carol replied. But I have been thinking. Elias leaned back. About what? Carol hesitated. About what I am. Elias frowned. You're a combat unit, right? Carol's glowing lines pulsed softly. That is what I was built for. But now, I am learning, changing, feeling. Elias wasn't sure what to say. He had never seen an eye, or whatever Carol was, question itself like this. Do you regret learning? He asked. Carol shook her head. No, but I wonder, if I was designed for war, does that mean I can never be anything else? Elias exhaled slowly. He didn't have an answer for her, but one thing was clear. Carol wasn't just a machine anymore. And that changed everything. The war never waited. Only 2 weeks had passed since Carol arrived, but Elias barely had time to think about her strange evolution. The war was growing worse. The Gralvok had launched a devastating attack on Trion X9, a vital mining planet, rich with resources humanity needed to survive. If the enemy took it, the entire war effort would weaken. Elias and his team were sent to stop them. Inside the Titan's edge, the ship hummed with energy as it soared through hyperspace. The mission was clear: defend the planet, secure the colony, and destroy the enemy forces before they could take control. Elias stood in the cockpit, looking at the holographic map of Trion X9. It was a barren world covered in metallic dust and deep mining tunnels, but its resources made it worth fighting for. Beside him, Carol watched the map with her glowing blue lines flickering softly. You seem focused, Elias said, glancing at her. Carol turned her head slightly. I am analyzing potential battle outcomes. The probability of success is difficult to determine. Elias smirked. That's not what I want to hear. Carol's glowing lines pulsed. Then I will say this. We will fight, and we will adapt. Elias chuckled. That's more like it. From behind them, Lieutenant Raynor spoke up. I still don't trust her, Captain. She may be good in a fight, but she's too unpredictable. Carol didn't react. She simply turned back to the map, but Elias noticed a brief hesitation in her movements. Did she care about what Raynor thought? We don't have time for doubts, Elias said. The enemy's already there. We land in 10 minutes. Raynor sighed but nodded. Let's hope she's on our side. The invasion begins. As the Titan's edge broke through the planet's thin, dusty atmosphere, The battle below was already raging. The Gralvok had landed hundreds of war machines, tall, insect-like mechs armed with plasma cannons, marching through the colony's ruins. Human forces were outnumbered, barely holding the defensive lines near the central mining facility. Elias gritted his teeth. Looks like we got here just in time. The ship shook violently as enemy anti-air cannons fired from below. Explosions filled the sky. Shields at 70%, the pilot called. We need to land now, Elias ordered. The Titan's edge swooped low, dodging enemy fire before finally crash-landing behind a ruined supply depot. Dust and fire filled the air as the landing ramp lowered. Move, 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 Elias shouted. His team rushed out, plasma rifles raised. Carol was the first into battle. She moved like a shadow, leaping over debris and dodging enemy fire with impossible speed. Her arms shifted, forming energy blades as she tore through the nearest Gralvok warriors. Elias and his squad opened fire, blasting through enemy lines as they pushed toward the main mining facility. The sounds of war filled the air. Explosions, screams, and the mechanical screech of the Gralvok war machines. Despite the chaos, Carol fought differently this time. Elias noticed it immediately. She wasn't just following orders. She was making decisions on her own, predicting movements, adapting strategies, even shielding human soldiers from enemy attacks. At one point, a wounded Marine fell behind, too injured to move. Carol, instead of pressing forward, stopped and carried him to safety, something no programmed AI would have done. Elias saw it happen and felt something deep in his chest. She wasn't just a weapon anymore. She was choosing to protect them. The turning point. As the battle raged on, Elias and his team reached the mining facility. The Gralvok had planted a massive bomb inside, intending to destroy the entire planet's resource supply. We have to disable it, Elias shouted. Carol stepped forward, scanning the device. This is beyond human technology. It is Gralvok biotech, highly unstable. Raynor cursed. Can you stop it? Carol hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then she said something that made Elias' blood run cold. I can merge with it. Elias grabbed her arm. What does that mean? Carol's glowing lines pulsed faster. I can interface with its systems, but there is a risk. If I fail, I will not survive. No, Elias said immediately. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Carol said, her voice soft but firm. This must be done. Elias clenched his fists. He had lost too many people already. He didn't want to lose her too. But Carol had already stepped forward. She placed her hands on the bomb, and her body began to shift, merging with the alien technology. Sparks of energy crackled through her form as she fought to override the detonation sequence. For a moment, everything went still. Then, boom! A massive shockwave erupted, knocking Elias and his team back. Smoke and dust filled the air. Elias coughed, pushing himself up. Carol, he called. Silence. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the smoke. Carol. She was damaged, her sleek body scorched, parts of her armor cracked, but she was alive. The bomb is disabled, she said. Then, almost as an afterthought, I believe that was painful. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. Welcome to the world of pain, Carol. Carol tilted her head. I do not like it. Elias grinned. No one does. Raynor, still catching his breath, stared at Carl. His suspicion had changed to something else. Respect. That was one hell of a risk, he muttered. But you saved us. Carol didn't respond. She simply looked at Elias, and for the first time, he saw something new in her glowing blue lights. Understanding. The battle for Trion X9 was over, but something bigger had begun. Carol was no longer just a machine. She was one of them. The battle for Trion X9 was over, but the war was far from won. Elias Voss sat on the ramp of the Titan's edge, his arms resting on his knees as he stared at the battlefield. The wreckage of destroyed Gralvok war machines lay scattered across the dusty terrain. Smoke still rose from the ruined mining facility, but at least the bomb had been defused. They had saved the colony, but the victory had come at a cost. He turned his gaze to Carl, who stood a few feet away, looking down at her own damaged body. The battle had left her scorched, cracked, and weakened. Some of her glowing blue lines flickered erratically. She had nearly died saving them. Elias exhaled. "How are you holding up?" Carol didn't answer immediately. She raised her metallic arm, observing the damage as if seeing herself for the first time. "My systems are unstable," she admitted. "I require repairs, but more importantly, I am experiencing something new." Elias frowned. "What is it?" Carol hesitated, then said, "Doubt." That made Elias pause. Machines didn't doubt themselves. Soldiers didn't either, not if they wanted to survive. He studied her carefully. "Why?" Carol's glowing lines dimmed slightly. "I was built for war, designed to fight, to calculate, to destroy. And yet, I hesitated before merging with the bomb. I considered not doing it. I felt fear." Elias' stomach tightened. He had seen fear in the eyes of many soldiers before battle, but hearing it from Carol was different. She wasn't supposed to feel anything, but she did. "You made a choice," Elias said after a moment. "That's what makes you different." Carol turned to face him. "Different. That is what concerns me. If I am no longer just a machine, what am I?" Elias had no answer. New orders. Before Elias could respond, his comlink buzzed. "Captain Voss, report to command. Urgent orders." Elias sighed and stood up. "Come on, Carl. Looks like we don't get to rest." As they entered the command center inside the base, Lieutenant Rayner and General Hastings were already there, standing over a holographic display. The general, an older man with gray-streaked hair and a scar across his cheek, nodded at Elias. "Good work on Tryon X9, Captain. You saved an important asset." Elias folded his arms. "What's the next mission?" Hastings' expression darkened. "We've intercepted Gralvok transmissions. They're preparing for a full-scale assault on Argus Prime, one of our largest colonies in this sector." Rayner's jaw clenched. "If they take Argus Prime, they'll have a direct route to Earth." Elias nodded grimly. "How much time do we have?" 3 days, Hastings said. "We need a plan." Elias frowned. "We don't have the firepower to stop them head-on." Carl, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "Then do not fight them head-on." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You have a better idea." Carol stepped forward, her glowing lines pulsing as she hacked into the holographic display, altering the battlefield map in real time. "The Gralvok expect brute force, but we must be unpredictable." The room fell silent as they watched her strategy unfold. Elias couldn't help but smirk. "I like the way you think." Rayner, however, still looked unconvinced. "And we're just going to trust an alien eye with our defense strategy." Carol met his gaze. "I have fought beside you. I have blood beside you. How much more must I do to prove myself?" Rayner stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. "Fine. But if this goes wrong, it's on you." Elias clapped his hands together. "Then let's get to work." A growing bond. Later that night, Elias found Carol alone, standing outside the base, gazing at the dark sky. He walked up beside her. "You really shut Rayner up back there." Carol's glowing lines flickered softly. "He does not trust me." Elias shrugged. "He's just cautious. A lot of people are afraid of things they don't understand." Carol turned her head toward him. "And you? Do you trust me?" Elias didn't answer right away. He had been a soldier for years, and trust wasn't something he gave easily. But Carol had saved him, saved his team, and now she was fighting for humanity in a war that wasn't hers. So he looked her in the eye and said, "Yeah, I do. For a long moment, Carol didn't move. Then, finally, she nodded. I will not let you down, Elias Voss. This was a warlord. The final confrontation. The Gralvok warlord stood at least 10 feet tall, his armored exoskeleton gleaming under the red sky. His 4 glowing eyes locked onto Elias and Carol as he stepped forward. I am Varzok, the Reclaimer. The warlord's deep voice echoed through the battlefield. Surrender now, human, and I will make your deaths quick. Elias wiped blood from his lip and raised his rifle. Yeah, I don't think so. Varzok charged forward, his massive energy blade slashing toward Elias. But before it could land, Carl moved faster than the eye could follow. She blocked the attack with her own energy blade, the force of the clash sending a shockwave through the air. Sparks flew as the 2 warriors locked weapons, their glowing energies clashing violently. Elias saw his chance. He rolled to the side, raising his rifle and firing at Varzok's exposed flank. The bullets bounced harmlessly off the warlord's armor. Varzok roared, knocking Carl aside with a powerful strike before turning toward Elias. The warlord lunged, his blade swinging downward. But at the last second, Carol intercepted the attack, shoving Elias out of the way. The energy blade cut deep into Carol's side. Elias' eyes widened. Carol. She staggered, her glowing lines flickering violently. But instead of retreating, she gripped Varzok's wrist, locking him in place. Her voice was quiet but firm. Now, Elias. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed a plasma grenade, activated it, and slammed it against Varzok's chest. The warlord's eyes widened in shock. Boom. The explosion tore through his armor, sending him flying backward in a burst of flames. Silence followed. Then, finally, Varzok's massive body collapsed, motionless. The warlord was dead. Victory, but at a cost. Elias rushed to Carol's side. She was still standing, but barely, her form flickering, her body damaged from the battle. He caught her before she could fall. Stay with me. Carol's glowing blue eyes flickered up at him. Did we win? Elias looked around. The remaining Gralvok forces were retreating. Their morale shattered. He smiled. Yeah, we won. Carol's lights dimmed slightly, but there was something almost human in her expression. I am glad, she whispered. Elias tightened his grip. He wasn't going to lose her. Not now. As the sun began to rise over Argus Prime, Elias knew one thing for certain. The war wasn't over, but with Carol by his side, humanity had a chance. The battle for Argus Prime was over, but the war was far from finished. Elias Voss sat in the medical bay of the Titan's Edge, his uniform still stained with dust and blood. He had seen many battles, many victories, and many losses. But this time, something felt different. Carol lay on the medical table beside him. Her once bright blue circuits flickered weakly, her metallic body damaged from the fight against Varzok, the Gralvok warlord. The plasma blade wound on her side was deep, and her systems were unstable. Elias gritted his teeth. She had saved his life. Again. A soft hum filled the air as Dr. Marin, the ship's engineer and medic, examined Carol's damaged form. She pushed her glasses up her nose and sighed. She's in bad shape, Marin said. Her energy core is unstable. If we don't repair it soon, she could shut down permanently. Elias frowned. Can't you fix her? Marin hesitated. Her design. It's beyond anything I've ever seen. I can repair the external damage, but her core. That's something only her creators could fix. Elias exhaled slowly. That was a problem. Carol's creators were long gone. Her people had been wiped out by the Gralvok long before humanity even entered this war. But there had to be a way. Before Elias could speak, Carol's dim eyes flickered open. She stared at him weakly, her voice soft. You are troubled. Elias let out a small chuckle. Yeah, because you almost died. Carol tilted her head slightly. I am. not afraid of dying. Elias shook his head. Well, I am. I'm not losing you, Carl. Not after everything. There was silence between them. Then Carol spoke again, but this time her voice was different, urgent, almost fearful. Elias, I have detected something. Elias narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Carol's circuits flickered faster. Before the warlord fell, he sent a signal. Elias' stomach dropped. A signal? To who? Carol's glowing lines pulsed in mourning. To something far worse. The forgotten weapon. Minutes later, Elias and Carol gathered with General Hastings and Lieutenant Rayner in the command center. A holographic projection hovered over the table, a strange, unknown structure in deep space. It was massive, larger than any Gralvok warship they had encountered before. Ancient, hidden, and now active. Carol's voice was serious. Varzak did not fight us to win. He fought us to delay. Hastings' eyes darkened. Delay for what? Carol pointed to the structure. For this. The Gralvok superweapon. The signal he sent activated it. Elias clenched his fists. Where is it? Carol zoomed in on the star map. It is located in a restricted zone near Sifos Nebula, hidden within a dead planet. Rayner cursed under his breath. If they activate that thing, it could wipe out entire colonies. Elias turned to Hastings. We can't let that happen. Hastings nodded. Agreed. But we're already spread thin after Argus Prime. We won't have a fleet ready in time. Elias exhaled. Then we don't send a fleet. Everyone looked at him. We go in small, fast, and quiet. A strike team. Get in, disable the weapon, and get out before they realize we're there. Hastings frowned. That's a suicide mission. Carol stepped forward. Then I will go. Elias shot her a look. You're barely holding together. Carol's glowing lines steadied. I am still operational, and I am the only one who can interface with their systems. Elias sighed. He knew she was right. Hastings finally nodded. All right, Captain. You'll lead the strike team. Take Carl, Rayner, and whoever else you trust. Elias saluted. We'll get it done. Into the enemy's heart. Hours later, the Titan's edge soared through deep space, heading toward the forbidden sector of the Gralvok Empire. The tension inside the ship was thick. Elias checked his rifle for the third time, making sure everything was set. Rayner stood next to him, arms crossed. This plan is insane. Elias smirked. That's why it'll work. Carol sat across from them, her systems flickering more steadily now after Marin's temporary repairs. She observed Elias carefully. You are calm, she said. Elias shrugged. Nah, I just don't like showing fear. Carol tilted her head. Humans feel fear, but they still act. That is strange. Elias chuckled. That's what makes us human. Before Carol could reply, the ship's alarms blared. Rayner rushed to the console. We've reached the target. The team gathered around the viewport. Outside, a massive dark planet loomed ahead. Orbiting it was the Gralvok superweapon, a massive ring-shaped structure glowing with ominous red energy. Carol's circuits pulsed rapidly. That is not just a weapon. It is a planet killer. Elias' expression hardened. Then we destroy it before it can fire. Hastings' voice came through the comms. You're on your own from here, Voss. No backup. Elias smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. The ship moved into stealth mode, slipping past the Gralvok patrols. Elias checked his team one last time. Rayner, Carl, 2 elite soldiers, and himself. This was it. A mission deep behind enemy lines. A battle against impossible odds. And a chance to change the fate of the war. Elias took a deep breath, then smirked. All right, people. Let's go save the galaxy. The stolen Gralvok transport ship glided through the darkness of space, heading toward the massive ring-shaped superweapon. Elias Voss stood near the cockpit, watching the enormous structure reloom closer. The fate of millions depended on this mission. Inside the transport, the strike team was ready. Raynor checked his weapons, his face tense. Carl's glowing circuits flickered steadily, her systems barely holding together, but she remained focused. Two elite soldiers, Mason and Dax, stood by, silent and prepared. Elias turned to them. "We get in, plant the explosives, and get out. No mistakes." Raynor smirked. "You make it sound easy." Elias grinned. "That's the plan." The ship's systems beeped. They had reached the docking bay. Carl looked at Elias. "They will detect us soon." Elias nodded. "Then we move fast." The doors hissed open, and the team stepped into the enemy stronghold. Infiltration begins. The Gralvok docking bay was silent and dark, with only a few enemy patrols moving between the towering metal structures. Elias signaled the team forward. They moved like shadows, avoiding detection as they slipped past the guards. Carol's glowing lines pulsed. "The control center is ahead. That is where we must disable the weapon." Elias checked the map and the reactor. Carol pointed to a deep section of the station. "There. If we destroy it, the entire structure will collapse." Raynor grinned. "Now that's my kind of plan." The team split up, Elias and Carol heading for the control center, while Raynor, Mason, and Dax made their way toward the reactor. The mission had begun. The control room fight. Elias and Carol moved swiftly, avoiding enemy patrols as they approached the control center. But as soon as they reached the entrance, alarms blared. A Gralvok squad rushed in, weapons raised. Elias didn't hesitate. He opened fire, plasma rounds tearing through the enemies. Carol moved like lightning, her energy blades slicing through the armored soldiers with precision. The fight was brutal. More enemies flooded in. Carol took a hit to the shoulder, sparks flying from her damaged circuits. Elias fired his last shot, taking down the final enemy. He turned to Carl. "You good?" Carol's voice was weak. "I will continue." Elias nodded. "Then let's finish this." They rushed to the control panel. Carl connected her systems, her circuits glowing as she hacked into the station's core. Her voice was urgent. "The weapon is charging. We must disable it now." Elias watched as the red energy around the station pulsed. If it fired, an entire human colony would be wiped out. Carol's circuits flickered dangerously. Almost there. The alarms grew louder. More enemies were coming. Elias raised his rifle. "Hurry, Carl." Carol's circuits pulsed one final time. Shutdown complete. The weapon deactivated, its energy fading. Elias exhaled. "Good work. Now let's blow this place up." The reactor meltdown. Raynor's team had already reached the reactor. Mason planted explosives along the core, while Dax covered him. Raynor grinned. "This place is gonna light up like a supernova." But before they could finish, a massive Gralvok commander stormed in. The alien warrior roared, charging toward them with a massive energy hammer. Dax fired, but the Gralvok deflected the shots, slamming into him with brutal force. Raynor cursed. "Mason, set the timer. I'll handle this guy." Mason set the detonator. Done. Raynor faced the enemy, dodging a powerful strike before firing a plasma shot straight into its chest. The commander staggered but didn't fall. The alien grabbed Raynor, lifting him off the ground. But before it could finish him, a blade pierced through its neck. Carol stood behind it, her energy weapon glowing. The commander collapsed. Raynor coughed. "Good timing." Elias ran in. "We need to go. Now." Mason held up the detonator. "Timer's set. We have 2 minutes." Elias grinned. "Then let's move." Escape and victory. The team ran through the station, dodging gunfire as the structure began to collapse. Explosions ripped through the halls as flames engulfed everything. The docking bay was ahead. The Titan's edge waited for them. They rushed aboard, the doors sealing shut just as the station erupted in a massive explosion. The ship shot into hyperspace, leaving the destroyed weapon behind. Elias collapsed into a chair, breathing hard. Rayner laughed. That was insane. Mason grinned. But we did it. Elias turned to Carl. Her circuits were flickering weakly. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You okay? Carol's voice was soft. I will survive. Elias smiled. Good, because we're not done yet. They had won a great battle. But the war wasn't over. As the ship headed toward home, Elias knew one thing. As long as humanity fought together, they would never fall.